Hey there, it's Juju, and today is day 21. I'm kind of at an odd angle here, but once again, I'm going to do some readings, and this is from Healing Resistance by Kazu Haga. And some of the topics today may be tough for some people. So, again, we're talking about Principle 3 of Nonviolence, which is attack forces of evil, not persons doing evil. But today we're going to be talking some more in depth about policing and also about suicide. And I'm going to be talking about my experience with that. So if this is going to be too triggering of a video, I understand, though I think that this view is pretty compassionate. So we are going to be talking about some pretty terrible incidences that are well known, and then just the nonviolence perspective on it, which is that we are all part of the beloved community. And so in the worst cases, this type of influence can easily lead to abuse and murder. We continue to see this dynamic play out over and over and over again. Take the case of Geronimo Yanez, a 28-year-old police officer in St. Anthony, Minnesota. On July 6th of 2016, Officer Yanez and his partner pulled over a 1997 Oldsmobile because, according to them, the two occupants just looked like people that were involved in a robbery. The two occupants were Philando Castile, a 32-year-old African-American man, and his girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds. Reynolds' 4-year-old daughter, Deanna, was sitting in the back seat. They were on their way back from the grocery store when they were pulled over. There was no panic. This was an all too normal occurrence for Castile, just another day driving while black. Less than 1 minute into the interaction, Yanez fired 7 rounds at Castile, hitting him 5 times. He would die 20 minutes later. Reynolds began filming the incident shortly after Castile was shot and streamed it live on Facebook. Years after watching that video for the first time, there are 2 voices that I can't get out of my head. The first is the voice of young Deanna, consoling her mother after they had both witnessed the murder of Castile. "It's okay, Mommy. It's okay. I'm right here with you." I remember when this happened. But there's another voice from earlier in the video that still haunts me, and that is the voice of Officer Yanez. He is not the voice of a ruthless killer. It is the desperate fear of a young man who made a deadly decision in the heat of a conflict and is just realizing the gravity of that decision. When looking into this incident, I found out that Yanez had attended 2 seminars put on by a private company called Calibre Press in the 2 years preceding the shooting. The seminars, each 2 days long, are titled The Bulletproof Warrior and Street Survival. Critics claim that these seminars instill a sense that officers are constantly in danger. They show graphic images of officers killed in the line of duty with the message that if you hesitate for even a second to pull the trigger, you could end up as one more fatal example at the next seminar. This does not excuse Yanez's actions, but to me, the story begins to make sense. Officer Yanez and many like him are being trained to be afraid and trigger happy. Layer that on top of the history of race in this country, the tense relationships between law enforcement and African American community, and stereotypes of young black men in the media, in the absence of concerted efforts to change the way police are trained, it's no wonder why these shootings continue to happen. Or take the case of Eric Casebolt, an officer in McKinney, Texas. In 2015, residents of an upper-middle-class neighborhood in McKinney called the police to complain about a pool party involving dozens of teenagers, many of them black. When Casebolt showed up to the scene, all hell broke loose as he started yelling obscenities at the teens and ordering them around while pointing his baton at them. At one point, Casebolt grabbed a 15-year-old girl by her braids and threw her down on the ground and pulled out his gun and aimed it at another group of teenagers. And I remember seeing when this incident happened as well. While nothing justifies his action, again, when you understand more of the backstory, it begins to make sense. The pool party was the 3rd call that Casebolt received that day. His first call was to the scene of a suicide, where he had to console the widow of a man who had just killed himself by shooting himself in his head in front of his children. Right after having to take photographs of the man's body, Case Bolt was called to another incident where he had to talk a girl down from killing herself in front of the family by jumping off a ledge. These two incidents took an emotional toll, as they should. No one would want our police officers to be so disconnected from human emotion that witnessing such tragedies would have no impact on them. However, instead of being given counseling or time to take care of himself, Case Bolt went right on to his next call of the day. Who is really at fault here? Officer Case Bolt for letting his humanity get the best of him, or the institution of policing, which didn't care enough about Case Bolt's mental health to even give him the rest of the day off? Do we blame Case Bolt for acting outrageously after witnessing two tragedies, or do we blame the system of policing that instructs employees to suck it up and move on to the next call? The system of policing is an institution that hurts all parties. I'm not naive enough to think that we do not need some system of individuals who are highly trained to intervene in situations of escalated conflict. But the system we have today does not serve anyone long term, and it needs to be changed. Attacking any one individual will not lead to long-term change. I have talked to officers who have shot and killed people in their work. One officer told me with his voice shaking that nothing is ever the same once you take someone's life. I could feel the tears welling up in his eyes on the other side of his dark sunglasses. Another person who had a son who had to retire from the force after shooting and killing somebody. Despite the rhetoric that I sometimes hear from my peers, no one enjoys taking the life of another human being. If some individuals have been so dehumanized and desensitized that they are not able to recognize the damage of their own soul after taking another's life, it is only because a system has beaten the humanity out of him. And I see this, I'm just going to talk briefly about those two things, because I see this when I go into prison and sit with the Brothers in Blue, many who committed murder, took a person's life in their younger years, usually gang-related. And it can, I think that that's so true, that if you take someone's life, there is a cost to you for the rest of your life. And as far as the officer having to deal with those suicide, the one, an actual suicide, seeing the body. When I worked in King Library, which is an 8-story building, we had 2 suicides where people jumped off of the railing and landed in front of the circulation desk in front of my staff that was working. And I had to come up and see the bodies. And when people commit suicide, it is traumatic to the witnesses. And for those security guards that worked at the library, they were off for months after having to deal with that. And so to think about this police officer, after dealing with 2 suicides, an attempt and a real suicide, just to not recognize that, that officer needs some time off and some training. And, I'm sure that the level of PTSD is, as high. I don't know how it compares to the prison guards, because I know that the prison guards are the same as combat veterans in Afghanistan. So I just, again, this comes back to attack forces of evil, not people doing evil. And it's not that all institutions are evil, but when we can make training so that people aren't put in that position, I think that, the use of force laws that we have with the police are ridiculous. And that if you kill someone, you have, failed to de-escalate the situation. And also there's so much mental illness and we expect so much of our police. It is, I'm glad that there's now programs where you can try to call a mental health specialist first rather than the police. So anyway, that's just a few of my thoughts. And again, healing resistance, by Kazu Haga. I'm going to be reading one more, the end of this chapter, because I don't want these to be too long. So this is Juju. I'm definitely unfiltered and unedited. Lead with love. Have a beautiful day, and make a difference in somebody's life.